I think the words of the president here were incredibly powerful. He spoke personally about the moral outrage that he felt, which is shared by people all across the world. It does not mean he is articulating a change in policy. It does not mean he's laying out a change in U.S. policy.
Does he regret that those words at the very end of the speech overshadowed a larger message, which obviously he put a lot of thought into in the days leading?
Absolutely not. He spoke from the heart.
Is that Michael Scott and Pam? Brand new spin from the White House as they try to walk back their walk back after President Biden walked back his walk back over what he said about removing Putin. Apologies if that sentence just made your brain walk back. The White House now claiming Biden was speaking in his personal capacity about Russia's president, even though they said he wasn't several times. Trying to figure out what Biden actually meant is so confusing that Joe actually had to use note cards just to get his story straight. It even came with the helpful label, Tough Putin Q&A talking points, in case he got mixed up with other cards. And if you think this turned into a total disaster, don't worry. Don Lemon's got the White House covered.
Quite honestly, I think this is a media-manufactured story. I think we should ease off a little bit because that's not what the president said. He did not say regime change.
Okay, it's all just manufactured, like the crime wave in Hunter's laptop. Jesse, the personal capacity line.
Yeah, 25th Amendment, right? You remember that?
Yes.
Remember that? What did Trump say? Television, lion,
camera.
cane. Right. Yeah. The best scores ever. Yeah, I don't know. This seems a little more serious this time. Last time it was trivial. I think they might have to stop playing the Hail to the Chief when this guy walks in the room because he is not up to performing the duties we expect as a commander-in-chief. Has anybody seen the raw footage of his sit-down lunch at the mess hall in Poland with the American soldiers? The media is covering this up, but I got to the bottom of it.
Oh, geez.
He walks in the room, and there's no electricity. He starts telling a story about the last time he went to Iraq and saw Beau Biden. And he says, oh, Beau Biden wanted to hide his name, so he changed it to Hunter. And then the story never landed, and the whole place was silent. And then he just sits down and gets a piece of pizza. And I remember seeing the footage of Bush and Trump. You know, you go to a mess hall in a war zone, wherever you are, and you're serving the food. You're lighting it up. There's selfies everywhere. And people are juiced up. Yeah. This place, you could have heard a pin drop. Yep. He sits down, and he shoves a piece of pizza in his mouth. And you know what happens next? He starts choking. There was a jalapeno pepper on it and pepperoni. And he starts having trouble getting it down.
Right.
And they notice, the soldiers notice, and they start assisting him, and they start handing him a glass of water. And he sips on the water, and then he starts taking a napkin, and he rolls up the napkin, and he starts dabbing his forehead, and he puts it down.
Hot pepper.
There it is. There it is. Now, is this the way you expect the President of the United States to act with our soldiers a couple miles from a hot war with Russia? No. You expect more from someone like this. The wheels are falling off. Wait. This guy's like a vintage car. You see the gauges. The brakes are shot. It's no longer fun to drive it anymore. This is now dangerous.
Yeah, but Joe, you know why he ate the pizza like that?
Why?
Well, Leon Panetti gave us the answer yesterday. It's because he's Irish.
He's Irish. Right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Now, being Irish, I'm Irish.
Yes.
Being Irish is now the go-to excuse, apparently, for every one of these ridiculous farces. And I thought the moment yesterday when Peter Doocy, very calmly, as he does brilliantly, just talked him through all the ridiculous gaffes, then all the ridiculous walkbacks, and Biden just stared straight at Peter Doocy and went, none of that happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, we got that tape.
Right.
Do we have that tape?
None of that happened. It just didn't happen, he said.
There you go.
It was... Have we got it?
Yeah.
That other leaders in the world are going to start to doubt that America is back if some of these big things that you say on the world stage keep getting walked back.
What's getting walked back?
It made it sound like, just in the last couple days, it sounded like you told U.S. troops they were going to Ukraine. It sounded like you said it was possible the U.S. would use a chemical weapon, and it sounded like you were calling for regime change in Russia, and we know...
None of the three occurred.
None of the three occurred?
None of the three.
I mean, what does he mean, none of the three? We heard you say it. You're the President of the United States. We heard you say each of those things. Then we read the walkbacks from your own administrative White House press office. And then we saw you walking back the walkbacks. And now you've moved to full denial mode, or perhaps more sinisterly, he's moved to completely forgetting mode.
Yeah, that could
But
be.
he genuinely doesn't remember ever saying it.
It could have been the hot pepper. You never know. That totally
Fogged his mind.
Yeah, you know, Judge, I was going to ask you about, you know, having your most basic ideas on note cards, but I have that written down as a question. So who am I? Who am I to judge? Judge?
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, either he doesn't understand the consequences of what he said, or he doesn't remember. In either case, it's time for the 25th Amendment. And you know who has to get involved in the 25th Amendment? The Vice President. Kamala Harris would be all in on that one. But the problem really is that he's on the world stage. He is in a nation that is literally next door to a country where there is fighting, and we're on the verge of, Zelensky thinks, World War III. And when he says, for God's sake, this man cannot remain in power, Macron has to pull him back. They have to have a phone call. The ambassador to NATO has to pull it back. These are very dangerous, dangerous times. And by the way, the Russians themselves are fed up. Their economy is shot. They're losing people. They don't even know how many people. Their ruble doesn't amount to much anymore.
It's bounced back, the ruble.
Yeah.
I actually read that.
When did it bounce back? Today?
Yes, it bounced back. It's actually showing, doing well against the euro. Somebody was watching FBN today. I pretended I read an article. No one believed
But
it.
didn't you find the Irish thing the most ridiculous
Yeah,
thing
that's when you're
you've literally ever heard?
You know what that reminds me of? Remember when Cuomo was getting a little handsy and he goes, "Hey, I'm Italian. I just touch people."
Yeah.
You know, Dana, do you want me to ask you a serious question?
I'll-
You and I
ready.
both love
I'm ready. I
reading
thought about it.
Niall Ferguson. He believes that our White House wants to prolong this war, to bleed Russia dry, but also to defend the Ukrainians because it satisfies public opinion, but without costing American lives. However, you're risking thousands dead Ukrainians and millions of homeless just to bleed the country dry. That doesn't seem like a moral stance.
No, well, one thing I want to get to that question, but on the point about the president having note cards, some people have them, all right?
Right.
But one of the things he was saying is he was expressing a moral outrage.
Right.
When you express a moral outrage, you don't need notes.
Exactly.
Because
Except for
that
me.
comes from the heart. I also do not believe that you can claim that a president of the United States on the world stage, at a speech that they billed as the most important speech so far that the president has given in this war, is done in his personal capacity.
Yes.
That's just not believable to me, and that's why the European leaders were like, whoa, let me back away from this, and they had to have that meeting this morning. To Neil's point, Neil Ferguson.
Yes.
Not Neil,
Not
right?
Niall,
Neil, not
and Bo,
Niall.
not you.
The U is silent.
I think, I think that what he's talking about might be the practical result of what's going on.
Right.
I don't know if it's the intention or the strategy, because it seems to me if you wanted to bleed Russia dry, you would have started with the sanctions, which would have had the benefit of possibly deterring this whole situation in the first place. And certainly Zelensky thinks that.
Yes.
Because now you have a situation where you have multiple cities are destroyed. You have millions of people that are displaced. You have a Russian economy that is going to be in dire straits. Even if the ruble does come back a bit, they are in a terrible situation. But the one thing that Biden, I think he does not want to do, and we should not want, is for this to continue because of the risk of miscalculation or misrepresentation, as you saw in World War I, that led to the killing of millions, which led to the resentments of the Germans, which led to the World War II. All of that could be stopped. And that's why I think that we should be hopeful that these talks are ongoing.
Can I ask one difficult question? Because I know this flies against the general narrative, but at what point is the red line for our morality,
Right.
the West? At what point do we watch maternity hospitals being bombed, refugees being targeted and murdered on the way out as they try and escape, Americans in lines for bread because they're starving being gunned down, Holocaust survivors being incinerated in their homes, as happened last week? What is our red line? Because we know what Hitler's was, and we know when we stood up to him. I just look at what's going on, and I keep reading that Putin's losing. This is all going badly. Ukraine are winning. I don't believe any of that. I think Putin is doing exactly what he set out to do. He's ruthless. He's barbaric. He's getting more ruthless and more barbaric. And we're all sitting back, hiding behind, well, he hasn't attacked a NATO country. But I bet if he prevails in Ukraine and attacks a NATO country, what's he going to say? He's going to say, if you come after me, I'll use my nukes. And we're going to face the same moral quandary of a guy taking nuclear armament as a protective shield to genocide. And I just asked the question because at some point we're going to have to stand up to him. Otherwise, where does it stop? I'm just throwing that out there.
All right.
Good point.
There you go. Coming up, Chicago's mayor getting extra police protection after calling to defund the cops.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.